F1's second new track of 2020. Hello, my name is Alex Does F1 Stuff, and welcome back to a race weekend review for round number 12 in Portugal around the circuit of the Algarve. There we go, finally got that right. That took me so many times to get it right. Jesus. Anyway, yes, it is a race weekend review once again, and it is around Portugal, F1's second newest track so far this year. Now, as always, we will jump on into the little contents page. You can skip to whichever section you would like me to talk about. There will be a practice, a qualifying, and a race segment in this weekend's review. But as it is Friday evening, we will jump straight on in to practice, and we begin as always with practice 1, which is topped by Valtteri Bottas, a 1 minute 18.4. No idea if that's entirely quick. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see until qualifying. But 0.3 quicker than Lewis Hamilton, mighty impressive, and he seems to do quite well at new tracks, as he's managed to sort of have the upper hand so far, especially in Germany, where he got, was he on pole position? Was he on pole? Ooh, I can't remember. Yes, he was on pole position, and he also led the practice session as well. So for new tracks, Bottas has the upper hand, and it looks like he's got it so far, just over 0.3 ahead of Lewis Hamilton. Then we have Max Verstappen in 3rd place, and amazingly Charles Leclerc in 4th place. That Ferrari has actually got some pace back into it. Now, they did have some updates. They brought, I think it was a new rear diffuser package or something on the rear of the car that they brought, and it is clearly working very well. So I would expect for Ferrari, their aim is to get some cars into Q3 and definitely points for both cars. And then we have Alex Albon in P5, and he is actually very close to Max Verstappen. What is that? Just over 1.5 tenths, just under 2 tenths, and that's probably the closest he has ever been so far, especially in practice, but it is only practice 1. Then we have Carlos Sainz in P6, a stellar performance from the McLaren man there, with Racing Point Sergio Perez in P7, followed by Kimi Räikkönen in P8, a mega quick performance in that Alfa Romeo to get inside the top 10, followed by the Renault of Daniel Ricciardo. Now, the Renaults often don't do very well in practice 1, and their true sort of pace turns up in practice 2, so we're going to have to wait for that. And then a little bit further down the order, we have Gasly, Vettel, Norris, Kvyat, and then we have the Haas cars. They do seem to have a little bit of pace this weekend, after unfortunately having the announcement that both Kevin Magnussen and Romain Grosjean will not be continuing their relationship with Haas next year. Personally, I think it's a good idea. It's going to be sad to see both personalities leave, but ultimately they have both had their time. But Stroll is a bit of an interesting one, down in P15, just ahead of Giovinazzi and Grosjean, and massively ahead of the Williams. Williams haven't had the best of luck this weekend at all, 18th and last. And so with practice 1 all done and dusted, we will move on into practice 2, which is again topped by Valtteri Bottas. He is having an exceptional weekend so far on Friday, 6 tenths clear of Max Verstappen. But hello McLaren, what a performance from Lando Norris to put it P3, 2 tenths behind the Red Bull man, and Sainz is P5. Honestly, the biggest glow up so far this weekend. McLaren haven't really seemed on the pace the last few races, and now they have put in this insane performance, really sticking it to Renault, who only find themselves down in P9 and P13, which could spell a little bit of trouble for the yellow cars. But once again, it is Ferrari who actually have some pace this weekend, P4 and P6. For Vettel, I think that's the highest up Vettel has been so far in practice. He may have led a rainy practice, actually, thinking about it. I think he did top 1, but it was one where not many people ran. So P6, with everybody running in the dry, is definitely decent performance. And honestly, Q3 for both cars is definitely on the cards. Then we've got Pierre Gasly in P7. However, he caught fire. Caught fire in quite a big way. Red flag during the session as well, which I think cost Lewis Hamilton. I'm not 100% sure, because Hamilton is down in P8, which is a little bit unusual. He's 1.3 seconds off of Valtteri Bottas' time, so something tells me that's him missing a fast run, or something like that, as he's clearly had an 18.5 pace in him, and if Bottas has just gone into the 17.9s, you'd think Hamilton would be thereabouts, so perhaps he did miss a run, but we're not sure just yet. Unfortunately though, Renault haven't really turned up the wick. I did mention them in the McLaren segment a little bit, 9th and 13th. I was expecting a little bit more from them, but I'm also very happy to see Ocon ahead of Ricciardo, finally actually putting in some decent pace in that car. But again, it's the same story with Alex Albon, unfortunately. P10, 8 places is the difference between him and Max, and just over 1 second. I don't know what to say about Albon anymore. Oh, blimey. I don't know what to say about Albon anymore. Something isn't working. Something clearly isn't working, and he's just not happy in that car. But Williams have had a mega turnaround. P11 and P14 as well for Nicholas Latifi, comfortably ahead of the Alfa Romeos, Haas's, and some other cars as well, including the Racing Point of Lance Stroll. But this definitely does bode well for Williams, and I feel Q2 is again on the cards. And Q2, I think, also for both cars. I feel Nicholas Latifi can actually do it this time round. Unfortunately, Kimi Raikkonen couldn't maintain his practice 1 performance. He is now P15. Then we've got the 2 Haas cars, 16th and 18th, with Kvyat in between the pair. And Lance Stroll actually had an incident with Max Verstappen. He finds himself down in P19 with Giovinazzi in last. Now, this incident was cleared up by the racing stewards, and if I pop it here, it was just said that there was no further action being taken, as they were both on hot laps. You can hear on Lance's radio that was published, I listened to a copy of it somewhere, that his engineer tells him to keep pushing, so he's on 2 push laps, and then Verstappen is also on a push lap. Whether he's just started one, I'm not 100% sure on that. Both basically neck and neck. Verstappen is about a wheel width behind. They go into the first corner. Verstappen brakes a little bit later, gets about halfway in front on the inside, and they just fly off the track. In my opinion, 50-50 and definitely a racing incident, and very avoidable. It just shouldn't have happened. That accident just shouldn't have happened in the slightest. But that is everything for Friday. Join me tomorrow for practice 3 and qualifying. Well, practice 3 is all done and dusted, and it was a fairly interesting session, led by Valtteri Bottas once again, the second time in his career where he has led all 3 practice sessions ahead of a Grand Prix, with Lewis Hamilton just behind, 200ths back, with Verstappen in P3, Gasly P4 and Albon P5. And speaking of the Red Bulls, they actually seem to be close to Mercedes. They're actually sort of there. They're no longer half a second to 0.6 of a second behind. They're actually within 0.2. Now, this is looking promising ahead of qualifying, but as we do know, they have, Mercedes has stopped the development of this year's car, and Red Bull are presumably still continuing, otherwise they would have announced that they're stopping. So that could be why they're catching up, but we'll have to wait and see. And what an incredible performance from Pierre Gasly to put that AlphaTauri in P4. That is some mega pace. Yes, it was on the soft tyre, similar to the Mercedes, splitting the Red Bulls on the mediums, but still P4 is absolutely mega and bodes extremely well for qualifying later in the day. Hopefully he can get into Q3 along with Kvyat, but he had a bit of an iffy session, Kvyat down in P12. Then we've got Charles Leclerc happily sat in P6 doing a stellar job in that Ferrari, with the McLarens up next in 7th and 9th. A nice little turnaround from the previous Friday's running. They've had a decent turn in pace and hopefully can get both cars into Q2, and it's looking likely that they're going to beat the Renaults, as the Renaults haven't actually had that great of a pace turnaround. But ultimately, this circuit, Portimao in Portugal, is extremely similar to that of Barcelona in Spain. I'll just pop a side-by-side comparison up, as Mercedes actually put out a little picture. If you literally just flip Portimao horizontally, it's almost identical to Barcelona. It's kind of crazy, but they do look extremely similar, and Renault did kind of suck in Barcelona, so perhaps it's these sorts of traits that the car doesn't particularly like, and evidently from their 10th and 14th places, they're not doing very well. Then running further down the order, we've got Vettel, Kvyat, and then Kimi Raikkonen in the Alfa Romeo doing extremely well in P13. Absolutely Q2 potential in that car. Whether he can actually get it though, whether he can hook it all together is another story, but there is the pace in that car. With Russell as well doing extremely well in the Williams, another car with Q2 potential, but Lance Stroll is having some difficulties. I don't know whether he's still feeling the illness that he had, like recovering from COVID, whether he's still, like anything is up with that, I don't know, but he's just not comfortable in the car at all. And it's showing. It is definitely showing. He's been in the bottom quarter of the field in all of the practices so far, and 16th in practice 3 is not where you want to be. And then just to round off the order, we have Giovinazzi, Magnussen, Latifi, and Grosjean. It's unfortunate that Haas are all the way at the bottom after announcing that the drivers aren't staying with them next year, but as Grosjean has said, the car is just slow. It's just been a disappointing start to the weekend so far. They had one decent run of performances, I think it was in Spain or something like that, where they did well on Friday. They were in the top 10 comfortably, and then it disappeared, and now it's completely gone. All pace in that car has disappeared. But with practice 3 all done and dusted, we move into qualifying for the Portuguese Grand Prix. Can Valtteri Bottas fight back against Lewis Hamilton and grab a pole position? Let's find out. So let's just jump straight on into Q1, and the first driver to note is George Russell banging that Williams into Q2. A mega drive, just over 3/10 clear of Raikkonen and Giovinazzi, with the Haas cars in 18th and 19th. Very disappointing, unfortunately, but that just is the pace of that car. It's a shame, and hopefully they can somehow capitalise on maybe an eventful race or something like that to take advantage of some points. Then we've got Latifi down in last, and I think the less said about Latifi the better. He just hasn't shown anything in the slightest in that car compared to Russell. With unfortunately the Alfa Romeos also out in 16th and 17th places, but they are improving. They have had a steady sort of increase. There was a nice graphic, which again, if I find it, I'll pop it next to me. There was a nice graphic that F1 uploaded of the improvements of each team so far. And it just shows that they're actually slowly getting forwards, but just not quite quickly enough. Other notable performances in Q1 so far, the two Ferraris both in the top 10, sandwiching Alex Albon. The McLarens have slipped a little bit further down into the top 10 and outside of the top 10 than they were in practice 3, with Stroll still struggling in 12th, and then Ocon 13th with Kvyat 14th. And with Q1 out of the way, we will jump straight on into Q2, and unfortunately Esteban Ocon is knocked out. After getting the best of Daniel Ricciardo so far this weekend, when it matters, he has not managed to deliver so far, and he is out just over, a tenth of a second down. With Stroll once again popping up in this race weekend review in P12, he's not happy, is he? I've said it before and I'll say it again, he isn't comfortable this weekend. With Danny Kvyat down in P13, unfortunately for the Russian there, as his teammate Pierre Gasly is 7th place, and into Q3 there is admittedly only a 3/10 gap between the two, but it's still unfortunate to see one get into Q3 quite comfortably and the other to be quite comfortably out of Q3. George Russell bangs his Williams into P14 ahead of Sebastian Vettel. Now, I'm not quite sure what happened to Sebastian Vettel. I haven't seen qualifying as of yet, but I don't know whether there was a tyre strategy call, whether he was on the mediums, whether he was on the softs, I don't 100% know. But to be behind the Williams, and behind the Williams by just over a tenth, when Leclerc is making it into Q3, I'm not 100% sure what to make of that one. But the two McLarens have had a nice turnaround in pace, 5th and 6th, as we head on in to the Q3 shootout. And Q3, it is a pole position for Lewis Hamilton. Pole position number 97 or 98 or something like that, something ridiculous. He manages to snatch it once again from Valtteri Bottas. Bottas has been the star of the weekend literally the whole way through. I think Hamilton has only led Q1 or Q2 or something like that, and then when it matters, Hamilton bangs it out. And this is just going to suck for Bottas, but hopefully he can have that edge in the race like he did in Germany and be able to stick it to Hamilton and be aggressive and get that position back. Max Verstappen finds himself in P3 yet again behind the Mercedes pair, but closer. I think this is one of the closest margins that he's been to the Mercedes in qualifying so far, just 2.5 tenths. Then we have Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc P4 again for the second race in a row. That is insane and a mega performance. Those upgrades clearly working well for the Monegasque driver, and to be within half a second of the Mercedes as well, when just think a couple of months ago when the season started in July, they were nowhere. Sergio Perez finds himself P5, and I think that is comfortable for the Racing Points. They haven't quite lived up to the hype that they had at the beginning of the season with the pink Mercedes title, but definitely P5 is a solid effort from the Mexican, considering he still doesn't have that updated package on the Racing Point just yet. And to put it P5 ahead of Albon and the McLarens, solid job. And unfortunately for Albon, he is once again P6 and way behind Max Verstappen, just over half a second, which is just a little bit under his average. I think his average is around 6 tenths, 6.2 tenths or something like that. So to be under that, it's a little good, but still half a second is not good. With the McLarens having a decent qualifying in 7th and 8th places, I think they can be happy with that performance that they put through, but again, I don't know whether they wanted a little bit more, maybe one position, maybe to get in front of Albon, or maybe along with Perez, I'm not 100% sure. But to have both cars into Q3 compared to Racing Point and Renault, it is a good opportunity for them tomorrow to score some decent points. And Pierre Gasly, he just can't get enough praise this season. He really can't. Another solid performance, only P9, and out of all of the finishes so far in Q3, as Ricciardo didn't set a time, he was last, and last by a little way, but still an impressive performance, and hopefully he can bag another decent load of points tomorrow. But that is it for qualifying and the qualifying review segment for my race weekend review. Join me tomorrow for the race. Well, there we go, race all done. It is Sunday, it is currently 16:47 on Sunday evening, and we've just had the Portuguese race around Portimao. Honestly, I would rate it, what would I rate it? 6? No, 6 is too low, 7. I want to go 8, but I think I'm going to go 7.5. 7.5 out of 10, it was okay. And here are the results. It was a victory for Lewis Hamilton and victory number 92, with Valtteri Bottas in second and Max Verstappen in third. The 7th or 8th time that we've had that podium now in Formula 1 in any combination this season so far. Charles Leclerc a mega P4, then Pierre Gasly an even megara P5. Megara? Yeah, fine, I'll roll with that. P5, then Sainz, Perez, Ocon, Ricciardo and Vettel are your top 10. But we start with Lewis Hamilton. He equalled the record 2 weeks ago, and now he has beaten it. He is officially the most successful Formula 1 driver ever in terms of wins and ever in terms of pole positions. He's had that one for a little while. He is about to equal the all-time record for championships as well. It's only looking up for here. He had a bit of a dodgy first couple of laps, like the first 20 or so laps weren't particularly his best, but after he got back into the lead in front of Bottas, that was it. He just made his medium tyres last and he pumped it home to the end to the largest victory margin that we've had so far, 25.6 seconds. And to the man in second place, Valtteri Bottas. What do I want to say about Valtteri? The first couple of laps were okay. The first couple of laps were decent. Where he was in front of Lewis Hamilton, he was actually racy and managed to get in front, but then it fell apart. Much like Germany, he made some mistakes, made some lockups, etc, and then Hamilton managed to get past, and that was the end of it. And he didn't have any pace. None. He pitted shortly after Lewis, requesting to go on the opposite tyre again. that was denied. And then when he went onto the hard tyre, he just had nothing at all to play with. So a little bit disappointing from Bottas, and that championship it's gone. If it was not gone somehow 2 weeks ago, it's completely gone now. And then we have Max Verstappen in P3, the best that he could have achieved this Grand Prix unless something happened to one of the Mercedes, and honestly, a well-deserved podium. They have gotten closer. Red Bull have. Qualifying, it was, 2/10 or something like that to the Mercedes pair. That's the closest it's ever been, and that noise has come back and it's very annoying. But yes, not really much to say about Max Verstappen, apart from that little incident that he had with Sergio Perez in the second lap, something like that in the very beginning of the Grand Prix. Going round the outside, or Perez was on the inside, they touched, but it was declared a first lap opening incident, no further action to be taken. So other than that, it was a bit of an uneventful race for him, and third was the best he could do. But to Charles Leclerc in P4, the only man other than the top three to not get lapped, that is incredible. But perhaps, as someone has pointed out on Twitter, this could be the fact that Ferrari are now pointing the car towards him, rather than Vettel. So when Leclerc first joined the team in 2019, Vettel was still the Ferrari man. He was the person that they were building the car around, and then it happened to be that Leclerc outperformed him. And then after deciding to drop Vettel, Ferrari probably knew that very early on in order to get somebody else in the car. They've now tailored the car instead to Leclerc and not to Vettel, which could be why Leclerc is having such a strong performance. And you can only imagine how strong that combination would be if the engine was what it was last year. But ultimately, that's not the case at the minute. Their engine is now 100% legal, and P4, a solid performance. Those upgrades have really paid off. And then, oh my days, Pierre Gasly, what a season and what a race he had. Honestly, one of his better races. I wouldn't say better than Monza, as he got a bloody victory in Monza, but a mega race in terms of overtakes, in terms of just skillful driving and stuff like that, much like Nürburgring was when he had that defensive drive against Albon, a couple of good overtakes. He was just in tune with his car and up there with Leclerc in terms of performances of the season as a whole. And Carlos Sainz in P6, hello Mr. Start, what an impressive start he had. He was up in the lead of the Grand Prix, a McLaren leading a race. When was the last time that happened? Oh, Jesus Christ, when was the last time that happened? In the Turbo era? Maybe in 2014, actually. They may have led a race at one point. And their last victory was, 2012 or something like that? Crazy. And to be in front of the Mercedes, and to actually in the first couple of laps be pulling away from the Mercedes. He had a 1.5 second gap in front of Bottas at one point. Mega. He did unfortunately drop back. I think that's because he started on the soft tyres and they just degraded a little bit worse than the mediums. He fell back, and then 6th was the best that he could do. I was a little bit surprised that he fell back all the way to 6th and lost out to Leclerc and Gasly, but ultimately P6 for that McLaren is incredible. Sergio Perez is up next, and he had a sort of okay race. I will say okay, because not much really happened. It was looking good for P5 at the very end, but in the last 5 laps, those soft tyres that he was on his strategy sort of just dropped off, and he lost the place to Gasly, and then shortly after, on the last lap I think it was, or the penultimate lap, lost the place to Sainz. But other than that, not a great deal happened, and a very good recovery drive after being punted off by Max Verstappen. That Racing Point does actually have some pace, and I'm still not 100% sure if he's got the updates yet. Whether he actually does or not, but if he does, then they're clearly working, and if he doesn't, then my god, he's having a bloody good race to really advertise himself, maybe for that Red Bull seat, possibly, or maybe for a Haas drive, or maybe that Williams drive as well, we're not sure. Then Ocon is P8. Now Renault is a bit of an interesting one for this Grand Prix, because they didn't really feature much, and Ocon did an insane first stint. It was something like 50 odd laps on the medium tyres. Like, he went really deep and overcut everybody in this Grand Prix and managed to finish 8th, grabbing some good points, but the Renault didn't really have any pace. And you can see that from Daniel Ricciardo, P9, and behind his teammate on the optimal strategy, I would say. Starting on the medium tyres, etc., then pitting later in the Grand Prix, similar to the Mercedes. That was the optimal strategy, but it just didn't quite pay off. And nothing really came of it. What have I written for Ricciardo? Kind of struggled this race, that's all I've written. I've got a nice little sheet of paper in front of me with some notes on for everybody, and that's all I've written for Ricciardo. Kind of struggled, and that's all I can say. And with Sebastian Vettel being the last of the points finishes, I think he's only had like 3 or 4 points finishes this season. He's not having the best year in the slightest. I think it's his worst ever year. Definitely his worst ever Ferrari year, but it could just be his worst ever, like ever year. So I think he's scored podiums in every single year that he's been in. So his first official season, full season, was 2008 with Toro Rosso, because he did some races in 2007, but I don't think it was a full season, which he won in Monza, podium, and then 2009 he had wins, then he was with Red Bull, then he was with Ferrari. So I think he's had a podium in every full season he's been in, and to see him struggling this much is a shame, and to even be lapped and be competing for 10th, that's really disappointing. I was expecting some life to be injected into Vettel, as he's got this drive for Aston Martin, but he's not showing them any promise for next year. But Kimi Räikkönen, an incredible drive, an absolutely stupendous drive. Did you see his opening lap? His opening lap was ridiculous. He started like P16 or P17 or something like that. He's up to P6. Up to P6 by the end of lap 1, and he was holding on to it for a good few laps. But unfortunately, that Alfa Romeo has no race pace whatsoever, and he just dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped. It was a bit disappointing to watch because he could fight, he was there, and he still got that raw grit, that raw race pace. It's just he doesn't have the car underneath him to do it. Oh boy, Alex Albon. Oh god, am I really going to talk about this guy again? Okay, so Alex Albon needed to perform. There was an article, if I can find it, I'll pop it next to me, that Albon is under threat. He has 2 races, allegedly, from Christian Horner to perform and show that he deserves this seat. He didn't do it. He didn't do it. He was almost passed by a Williams of George Russell at one point. He was lapped by Max Verstappen. He didn't even finish in the points. What happened? He just went backwards. He started P6 or P5 or P4 or something like that, and just backwards, outside of the points, lapped. Dreadful. He's just getting worse and worse and worse. I don't know why Red Bull have given him so long when they only gave Gasly half a season, and they've given Albon now over a season because he's almost done an entire one plus the half one last year, and yet he's even worse than Gasly was. So I don't know what's going on. He either needs to go back to AlphaTauri and re-find himself exactly like Gasly has done, or he just needs to disappear and just needs to fade, and then they can bring in someone like Hülkenberg or maybe Perez from outside of the Red Bull family. But that is enough on Alex Albon. We will move to Lando Norris, who finished P13. A little bit of an eventful race. He was running up with Carlos Sainz at one point. When Carlos Sainz was leading, Norris was about P4, holding off Max Verstappen behind, but then it was the contact with Lance Stroll that really ruined his race, costing him a lot of damage to his floor and barge boards area of his car, which is a big shame, as he had some pace and he definitely could have scored some points, but that's racing, unfortunately. But George Russell, my oh my, is that boy unlucky. He was running in the points for such a long while. He was P9, P8, P10 for a large majority of this race, came into the pits, and then that was it. He pitted, lost his track position, and couldn't get through. That car, again like the Alfa Romeo, has no race pace, and unfortunately he can't use it to his ability. But still a very, very impressive drive, and hopefully advertising himself to Mercedes. He needs that Mercedes drive. If he's at risk of losing his Williams drive and his one key shot at getting to Mercedes, he needs to put these kind of performances in to stop that from happening. As we're still not 100% sure what's happening with Mercedes, as Hamilton hasn't signed, so it's possible that Hamilton could retire. The biggest shock of this decade, you know, in this sport, that would be insane, retiring at just equaling Schumacher and everything. And then Russell comes in. That would be interesting, but I think that's all going to happen instead for 2022. And then Giovinazzi, who? Gia who? Never mentioned, never seen, nothing ever happened, flew just dead under the radar. What? Yeah, nothing happened, didn't see him. 15th when Raikkonen is 11th. Come on, do a bit more, do something. He's not showing any reason to either get promoted up further in the sport or even stay in the sport, in my opinion. And then we've got the Haas boys of Kevin Magnussen and Roman Grosjean. Magnussen, again like Giovinazzi, just flew under the radar. The car, I feel, is one of the worst in terms of race pace, and it showed. He's P16 and nothing really happened. And as for Roman Grosjean, again, very similar races. Nothing really happened and just sort of fizzled into nothing. You didn't really see them other than when they were being overtaken or lapped. And then Nicholas Latifi is up next. Unfortunately, I can't find a photo of the guy. There is nothing from Nicholas Latifi on the Williams Twitter this whole weekend. If there is, it's a picture of him with some rakes on his car, which isn't ideal. It's not what I wanted. I wanted one from the race, but there isn't one. I wanted one from qualifying. There isn't one. So that just shows the level of Nicholas Latifi. He's again nowhere at all, and it's a shame. And then we've got Danny Kvyat. Now I have zero clue, none, zilch, what happened to Danny Kvyat. P19, over 2 laps down and behind Latifi. What? How? When? Why? What? Didn't see him involved in any incidents, didn't see him overtaking, didn't see him falling back. He just had a crap race. No pace whatsoever, nothing, nada, done. And finally, Lance Stroll. It just seems like a really petty sort of grr kind of race from Lance Stroll. He got a black and white flag for the corner cuts and extending track limits. He then got a 5-second penalty for extending said track limits. He then got a 5-second penalty for the collision with Norris, and then he retired on lap 51. Much like Albon's race 2 races ago, the one before Germany, where everything was going wrong and then he just retired. Much the same and very disappointing after not competing in Germany. And that is the race rundown of every single driver so far. We will move on into the championships and take a little look at where we stand. Lewis Hamilton has a 77-point lead, absolutely monumental over Valtteri Bottas, with Max Verstappen just 17 points back from the Finn, the only 3 drivers to be in the hundreds of points. Then we've got Daniel Ricciardo holding on to P4 still, with Leclerc moving up to 5th, with Perez, Norris, Albon, Gasly and Sainz all behind. In the Constructors, Mercedes can easily wrap it up next time out in Imola. Red Bull are comfortably ahead of Racing Point, who have McLaren and Renault very close behind. Ferrari have AlphaTauri in company for P6. If Ferrari lose out to AlphaTauri in P6, that's going to be really, really bad, with Alfa Romeo, Haas and Williams still at the bottom. With some visualizations of this data for you for those that like graphs, Lewis Hamilton comfortably in front of everybody else, and then in the Constructors it is much the same. Mercedes absolutely yonks in front of everybody. And finally, just before this video ends, I will be rounding up the Formula 1.5 championships so far for the season, and the graphs look a bit like this. This first one is excluding Albon, so this is excluding both Mercedes drivers and both Red Bull drivers. I was about to say Ferrari drivers, but that's not right. So both Mercedes and both Red Bulls have been excluded. Everyone's shuffled up, and then points are given accordingly, with Ricciardo maintaining his lead on 164 points with Perez in second. Then it's Leclerc, Norris, Stroll, Gasly, Sainz and Ocon, with the Constructors' Championship for this format dominated still by Racing Point maintaining their lead ahead of Renault and McLaren. And then the final Formula 1.5 graph so far is excluding the two Mercedes and Max Verstappen. It is still Ricciardo holding on to his lead in front of Perez, Leclerc and then Albon P4 with Perez, or Stroll, then Gasly, Norris, Sainz and Ocon in the top 10, with the constructors for this one looking much the same. Racing Point out in front of Renault, McLaren, Ferrari, AlphaTauri and Red Bull, as I did a horrible little belch at the end of Red Bull. But that is all I've got for you today, guys, for my race weekend review for the Portuguese Grand Prix. Catch me in the next video with whatever and whenever I decide to make it. I'll see you guys then.